book. I know it's doing well. Thank you. Now let's get more. Hugo Gurdon, editorial director for the Washington Examiner. Hugo, does this actually, we know the Senate is going to vote at some point, but does this actually get people to the polls for the midterm elections, and how?
I think that it's very important for the midterm elections. There have been a number of people on the right who are very influential, who have said, pass Brett Kavanaugh, otherwise you can kiss goodbye to the House majority. I think there are a lot of people who are Trump supporters and who are natural Republican voters who would be very disenchanted and feel like the Republicans have failed if they didn't get Brett Kavanaugh passed, and they would just stay away from the polls. They sort of wash their hands and say, what's the point in voting for these people? They never get these things done. If they get them, if Brett Kavanaugh is passed, and if then a textualist is put onto the court, and there are 5 textualists on the court, I think that will fulfill a promise that the Republicans and President Trump made in 2016, and that will actually increase Republican turnout.
Well, and that's what the president was saying today, that this is a promise kept in terms of the NAFTA becoming the USMCA, and some of the things he's doing now are keeping those campaign trail promises. I want to go back to what you were just talking about in terms of people coming to the polls. I thought this was interesting. So the president said, I've been telling my people, I am quoting him and saying that, right, that when you see Congress on the ticket, you see me on the ticket. Why is he making that point?
First of all, because it's true. I think that that President Trump is the central subject of the 2018 midterm elections. He's not on the ballot, but this is to some extent a referendum about him. Certainly, the resistance and the left are focusing on him because they believe that his unpopularity in polls will help them. He's also doing it because he's talking about promises kept. The trade deal today is a huge deal, in that he said before, when he was running for president in 2016, he said, we're going to get rid of NAFTA. It's been an awful deal. I'll make it better. He brought Mexico on about a month ago. He put pressure on Canada. Canada signed up at the last minute yesterday. It's something that the Republicans and the Democrats, the Republicans and President Trump can say, look, we said we'd do this. Now we've done it. Now re-elect us.
I only bring this up as a point where the president seemed to be almost bipartisan in a way. Senate Finance Committee ranking member Senator Ron Wyden was giving the president of Oregon, Democrat, giving the president at least a look at this. He said NAFTA has long time needed a serious overhaul. His thing is, how will you enforce this new agreement? The president was quick to say, the Democrats are probably going to like this.
Yes.
He said, but they're only going to like it for like a day. Does that score political points moving ahead to the midterms?
It's very good for the president to be able to reach out to people like Ron Wyden and say, here, you didn't like NAFTA, we've renegotiated it. The Democrats are in a very difficult position on this. They don't want to give President Trump any victories, and so they have opposed everything that he has done. But there are those, like Ron Wyden, who are seeing certain things that they wanted, like the renegotiation of NAFTA, actually come to fruition. So it puts the Democrats in a difficult spot. They want to go into the midterm elections saying, this is an incompetent president and a corrupt president, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But meanwhile, there are things that they probably think are rather good deals.
And I use that as an example because one of the things that Democrats have been pushing back victory-wise is Brett Kavanaugh. Quick last word from you.
I think the last word I say is very interesting to see the Democrats shift the goals. They are now talking less about Dr. Ford, whose testimony has some contradictions in it, and much more about Brett Kavanaugh's character, particularly drinking. I think this actually tells you that they know Brett Kavanaugh was a very credible witness and he seemed to be telling the truth. So now what they're suggesting is he drank so much that he blacked out and he doesn't remember this. So even though he obviously sounds like he's telling the truth, he can't actually remember having committed this awful act.
Hugh Gurdon, Washington Examiner, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
It was an attack that shook Las Vegas and America to the core. As we mark 1 year since the shooting rampage at a country music festival, the deadliest in our nation's history in the open era, we'll talk to one of the performers who was there. And President Trump touting his new trade deal with Canada and Mexico, calling it, quote, most modern and balanced agreement ever. So is this a big win for the president? More on the USMCA. Stay close.
The agreement will govern nearly $1.2 trillion in trade, which makes it the biggest trade deal in the United States history.
Trump, within the past hour and a half, wrapped up a news conference where he touted his new trade deal with Canada and Mexico. It will replace NAFTA, campaign promise that he says he kept. The president says the historic agreement will help return the United States to becoming an economic powerhouse, and also delivers on what he told voters all those years ago when he was running. Take a look.
We have successfully completed negotiations on a brand new deal to terminate and replace NAFTA and the NAFTA trade agreements with an incredible new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement called USMCA. Throughout the campaign, I promised to renegotiate NAFTA, and today we have kept that promise.
I'm going to bring in for the first time on Outnumbered Overtime. So good to see her. Susan Lee, reporter for the Fox Business Network. You know, the president is talking about where we have been. We've seen tariffs, so on and so forth. Why haven't we ever seen this before?
A $1.2 trillion trading relationship. Yeah, I think it was tense. I mean, they've been negotiating this for a year, and you heard some of the rhetoric between Trudeau and Trump. There's no bromance happening in the last few months, as, you know, it wasn't an Obama-era bromance between the two, but both were basically negotiating for their own side. And at the end, I think Trump and the administration got a pretty good deal. I mean, they didn't really have to give up a lot. They got access to Canada's dairy market. They protected their auto sector. 75% of all autos now have to be made in North America. $16 an hour wage for 40% of the cars coming in.
75% of those vehicles have to be made in America in order for them to have free access to our market, which is a deal.
Well, yes, but it's also expensive labor, because that was kind of the knock on Mexico, because a lot of people were taking a lot of auto manufacturing to Mexico because it would be cheaper to make. And then Canada, you know, a lot of their imports that come here to the U.S. are auto-based. So I think it was smart for President Trump to take this hardline tactic against Canada, saying, if you don't want a deal, we'll just tax your cars. We'll help our treasuries pay down debt. We don't need you.
So, Susan, when the world watches this, what does this communicate when the president says, I'm going to do a deal like this, and then he does a deal like this? And he says that there is upside down trading in other parts of the world and wants to work on those. What do you think is next?
Well, I think obviously the big one is China. And if you get NAFTA on side, if the largest trading relationship in the world is signed and the largest trading partner with the U.S. is still a holdout, he says to China, we don't need you at this point. We have Mexico, we have Canada, we have the European Union.
Is he right?
If you want to come on board, you know, we'll do it on our terms. I think it definitely strengthens his negotiating position. I kind of think that's kind of the reason they signed this NAFTA deal, or this new USMCA, which doesn't roll off the tongue that easily, does it, Harris?
Well, it's not an acronym, you know, but the U.S. part we all get, right? Okay. I want to talk with you a little bit more about China, because it's more complicated than just trade. You also need them to do a denuclearization deal with North Korea.
Yes.
You need them at the table.
You need them at the table. They probably, I think, most 90% of North Korean trade is with China. So you need to bring them on board for political heft in negotiating with North Korea. But also, don't forget, China needs the U.S. It's a $600 billion trading relationship. Most of that is Chinese goods coming to the U.S. In fact, the U.S. is at a $400 billion trading deficit with China. So yes, there are politics at play, but China also needs the U.S. for economic health as well.
Back to the United States politics. I don't know if you caught it when I was talking with Jason Chaffetz. I've been saying this for the better part of a couple of hours since the president spoke and held that news conference, because he made it a point. He said, Democrats are going to like this. I said, well, you know, the Senate Finance Committee, I mean, you've got Senator Wyden, Democrat, who said we've needed this sort of thing for a long time with NAFTA and a serious, overhaul. Enforcing this new deal is what Wyden and some others will look at. Is it hard for anybody to kind of throw hay on this? Because this looks like a good deal.
It looks like a good deal. On paper, it looks like a great Democratic deal, because it does help the labor unions and it does help bring up the minimum wage, right? Or wage, at least, with the auto workers, manufacturing jobs coming back. So on paper, it looks like a great Democratic bipartisan deal. But as you know, with politics in Congress in the new year, that's probably when they'll bring it to a vote. Who knows what will